Why do I laugh when I feel like crying?
All right, something that I never knew was that I knew there were some dictators around the world.
Sure.
But did you know that some of the dictators now apparently, allegedly, are drug addicts as well? That might explain a few things. Hugo Chavez now admitting in his speech that went widely undocumented, by the way, that he chews cocoa every morning, and he also eats something called cocoa paste, which, by the way, is addictive. And he gets it from the dictator in Bolivia.
What did you say?
Coca. It is coca.
Oh, coca.
Cocoa.
Oh, coca would be fine.
Oh, what is he talking about? He gets his cocoa paste.
Coca.
Coca. I got you going down the coca path
Cocoa
now.
paste from?
Bolivia dictator. Is he a dictator too?
Millions of people watch these shows consistently, night and day, throughout North America. Do they believe what they see? I hope not. But even the more serious end of the networks and print media in North America and Europe followed the lead of the Bush White House and divided the world into friends. That is, leaders who do what we want them to do, and enemies, leaders who tend to disagree with us.
Raul Castro and Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez, a declared enemy of the Bush administration.
I think that we have to view at this point the government of Venezuela as a negative force in the region.
The world's worst dictators. Hugo Chavez.
The Venezuelan president has become more dangerous to the U.S. than Fidel Castro ever was.
ExxonMobil says it's been ripped off by Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez.
The Latin American strongman.
There is such a thing as a killer clown, and he may be it in Latin America today.
Hugo Chavez is a dictator.
These rogue dictators like Chavez.
If you said, do you hate Hugo Chavez or Fidel Castro, I'd say I hate those guys.
Front of the book, you quote Otto Reich, who is the former ambassador to Venezuela back in the 1980s, is saying that he's more dangerous than bin Laden, and the effects of Chavez's war against America could eclipse those of 9/11.
Chavez is supporting terrorism.
I go around screaming and ranting and raving. I mean, all they do is raise. And I mean, it's the same dollar you're getting, so how far can you push it? 100 gallons of oil, 150 gallons of oil is about, right now, about close to $600.
However, Venezuela has been stepping in to make Alice's life a bit easier by delivering 100 gallons of free heating oil each winter. She is a 4-year beneficiary of the Citgo Venezuela Heating Oil Program, which provides free heating oil to 500,000 poor Americans living in low-income neighborhoods and shelters throughout the country. President Hugo Chavez, often demonized by Washington, helped launch the program in 2005, following Hurricanes Katrina and Rita.
All I know is that he was kind. He was kind to the people in the United States, and I'm sure he rules differently, like Obama rules differently. And who are we to tell these people how they should live, or how? I mean, are they invading our country? But they're not. They're being generous to give us what comes out of their earth at no charge. So, could you really have ill feelings against them? Yeah, I'm thankful for it. I really am.
In 1988, the Venezuelan economy was a mess. Real wages were plummeting and poverty had been rising for years. The Venezuelan government went on its knees before the IMF. The latter obliged, but dictated a structural adjustment program which guaranteed more pay, especially for the poor. When bus fares were raised in February 1989 in accordance with the IMF agreement, Caracas exploded in a fiesta of rioting and looting.
Police in the Venezuelan capital Caracas opened fire again today on demonstrators who were throwing rocks. This is the 4th day of violent protest at the government decision to raise prices on some very basic consumer items.
The government called out the army. Hundreds and perhaps thousands of Venezuelans were shot dead.
They killed my son, cried this woman at a Caracas City morgue today. Anxious relatives checked names on a partial list of more than 200 people reported killed. The morgue is literally overflowing with the bodies of the dead.
By 1997, Chavez decides to run for president. His main opponent is a 6'1", blonde, former Miss Universe. The contest becomes known as the Beauty and the Beast. The former Miss Universe is mouthing sugary platitudes while Chavez is preaching revolution, and that is what the people wanted to hear.
In Venezuela, the presidential election Sunday could lead to a sharp left turn in the government.
His supporters called it a punishment vote. It brought this man to power in Venezuela. A former military officer who has said he will fight against a tradition of corruption and economic inequity.
In 1998, 4 years after his release, as inflation rates in Venezuela reached 70% and the government made more cuts in social spending, the political establishment had been completely discredited. Despite the opposition of the entire media, Hugo Chavez was elected president.
Why is someone who staged a bloody coup just 6 years ago so popular among the people?
He had promised far-reaching reforms to raise the living standards of the poor, enhance democracy, and share the oil wealth of the country with those who had never benefited from it in the past. Over the next 3 years, Chavez proclaimed Venezuela a Bolivarian republic and began to fulfill his promise.
Por segundo día consecutivo, altos funcionarios del gobierno de Washington expresaron su preocupación por la situación política en el país.
We have been concerned with some of the actions of Venezuelan President Chavez and his understanding of what a democratic system is all about.
Obviously, Venezuela is important because they're the third largest supplier of petroleum. I would say that Mr. Chavez, and the State Department may say this, probably doesn't have the interests of the United States at heart.
Chavez's reforms provoked fierce resistance from the country's oligarchy.
Tenemos un gobierno mentiroso. Son un acto de embusteros.
They controlled the Venezuelan media and used it to foment opposition. They also mobilized support within the military and received help from the United States and Spain.
Pienso que lo más razonable para el señor presidente de la República y su gabinete es que o presenten voluntariamente su renuncia o, bueno, o desaparezcan del país.
A businessman, Pedro Carmona, was chosen to be the new president. He supposedly flew to Madrid to be measured for a presidential sash.
El golpe contra Chávez tuvo un motivo, petróleo. Oil. Bush planificó. Primero, Chávez. Petróleo. Oil. Segundo, Saddam.
Hussein,
Irak. La causa del golpe en Venezuela y de la invasión a Irak,
Coup in Venezuela and Iraq
la misma, petróleo.
Much of the U.S. media welcomed the coup. The New York Times editorial board wrote, "Venezuelan democracy is no longer threatened by a would-be dictator." This reference to Chavez ignored the irony of what was actually taking place at the hands of a real dictator.
Se suspende de sus cargos a los diputados principales y suplentes a la Asamblea Nacional. Se destituyen de sus cargos ilegítimamente ocupados al presidente y demás magistrados del Tribunal Supremo de Justicia, al defensor del pueblo y a los miembros del Consejo Nacional Electoral.
Y dirigentes de Acción Democrática introdujeron ante el Tribunal Supremo de Justicia una declaratoria de insanía mental del presidente de la República, teniente coronel Hugo Chavez.
The IMF, usually slow in responding to genuine requests for aid from starving Africa, was quick off the mark to demonstrate its support for the coup.
I hope that these discussions could continue with the new administration, and we stand ready to assist the new administration in whatever manner they find suitable.
The aim was straightforward. The IMF was making it clear to the world that the toppling of Chavez was in the interests of global capitalism.
And there's reason why Washington is almost certainly smiling.
We import more oil from Venezuela than any other OPEC nations.
Oil prices dropped sharply today with Chavez's departure.
The reason why prices are coming down so dramatically, more than likely, whoever replaces Chavez is going to be a lot more friendly to United States interests than this previous president was.
Tú preguntas por qué no me mataron. Me mandaron a matar. Solo que yo soy un soldado. Yo pasé media vida en la Fuerza Armada y los militares venezolanos, sobre todo los más jóvenes, me ven como su líder.
But as news spread of what had happened, the poor dramatically marched to the palace in huge numbers.
Yo voté por Chavez y yo quiero que Chavez termine su mandato, porque si esto es democracia, debe dársele respeto a las leyes.
And soldiers even told their officers that they would not back the coup.
Se cerraron y me protegieron. Y luego me rescataron en la isla los paracaidistas con los helicópteros. Yo soy líder paracaidista y allá fueron mis paracaidistas. Y me trajeron otra vez al palacio, rodeado de pueblo.
Carmona had to flee the palace.
El cardenal llegó al sitio donde me tenían, a la isla, a pedirme que firmara la renuncia. Y es porque desde Washington estaban pidiendo la renuncia firmada. Le dije, vamos a rezar, vamos a rezar porque vienen a rescatarme. Se asustó. Estando él ahí, llegaban los paracaidistas. Y luego yo me lo traje a él en el mismo helicóptero. Le dije, venga. Sí, me dijo, vamos a rezar, presidente.
Why did they do such a lousy job of it? It was a dinky coup. I mean, why didn't they kill him when they had him? It wasn't heavyweight, you know, the way they did it, compared to Guatemala and Chile and Argentina.
La Venezuela del año 2000, 2002, no es la Guatemala del 54, no es el Chile del 73. Esta es una revolución, yo lo he dicho, pacífica, pero armada.
El ejército venezolano forjador de libertades está con su pueblo.
Muy buenos días a todos y sigamos avanzando con calma y con cordura. Sigue. Respetando la virtud y honor.
The New York Times editorial board seemed embarrassed for supporting the coup and its government.
The White House today admitted that U.S. officials held several meetings with Venezuelan opposition leaders in recent months to discuss the ouster of President Hugo Chavez, but insisted at every turn today that not once did they signal a military option was acceptable.
We explicitly told opposition leaders that the United States would not support a coup.
On Friday, it appears they did just that, embracing Chavez's successor at the same time U.S. allies in the region condemned what they clearly saw as a military coup. When Chavez was returned to power the very next day, the White House looked like it had sided with coup plotters over democracy. Some Democrats today called that deeply troubling.
I think it's incumbent upon the greatest democracy in the world to defend democratically elected governments.
I don't think that the United States had a very enlightened policy towards Venezuela specifically or Latin America generally throughout the Bush administration, but this particular incident was the worst possible decision the United States could have taken. It not only locked in eternal enmity from the Chavez administration, but it made it very difficult for anybody else in Latin America to like the United States.
He says that the coup that took place in his country was engineered by the United States, and some in his administration say that, in fact, you had something to do with it. What do you say when you hear that?
Well, I have to laugh because the coup, first of all, there was no coup. If there had been a coup, I think Mr. Chavez would have been removed. There was a four-month investigation by the State Department. There was absolutely no U.S. involvement in that action that Chavez calls a coup.
Yes, the United States was hosting people involved in the coup before it happened.
There was involvement of U.S.-sponsored NGOs in training some of the people.